Alex, Mother Nature has missed the memo that April showers bring May flowers.
I know it is pouring down rain this wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Happy Memorial Day to all of our American viewers. To those outside of America, it's
Another
just another
Monday.
another weekend. But for us, it's a good weekend. Kind of the purpose of Memorial Day is remembering those we've lost, those in the armed forces, such as my co-host over here. Um, that's your day's more Veterans Day than it is
Yeah, I'm
or
still here.
Armed Forces Day because you're still
I'm still
active
here.
service. Yes, but remembering those lost in the armed forces, and then as well all the first responders that we've lost. Just I think last week up in the state of Maine, they lost a few first responders. Actually, they had a bad week. There was a big lumber mill fire that there was like a dust explosion, and they had a line of duty up there. So remembering those, giving them a moment, respecting their sacrifice. But welcome everyone to Life the Complete Story. I'm Alex. That is Tyler. We are your host today on this very rainy weekend.
Very
But
rainy.
it is starting to look up. The weather's looking up a little bit. The beginning of this past week was like 90s, so it's trying to be summertime. It's thinking about it.
But we will start how we always start with our nature in the news. Alex, today's
Yes.
article comes from Griffith University. We're talking about humpback whales. For those of you that don't know, humpback whales go through a massive migration, going from feeding grounds to breeding grounds. T- Typically, how I remember it is they tend to stay more towards the coastline ish,
Hmm.
and go north south. In America, we tend to focus more on like the Pacific side, where it's like Alaska and like Northern California, and then they'll migrate south to um, Chile, Argentina area. Is my recollection. I might be wrong. I'm not a whale expert.
Um, I know the two whales that we're talking about in this article today, they traveled between a couple breeding grounds, one in Australia and the other off the coast of Brazil.
All right. So you had
So
to go
this
the
is
whole way around South America.
basically halfway around the world. So this is a record-breaking migration of 15,000 kilometers through the ocean, which I looked it up. That is 9,320.6, we'll round up, miles. So nine, well, over 9,300 miles. So that is a ridiculous amount of distance to cover. Like you said, that is halfway around the world, and over 14,000 kilometers of that was over open ocean. So it's not like Tyler said, like they had coastline to reference. They were going off of vibes,
Pretty much.
basically.
Because they can't exactly, they're not like people. They don't chart the stars. They said, "Yep, this is the right way," and took
Yeah.
off.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, that is something that, especially a lot of wild animals, do. They kind of have an innate sense of direction, especially like magnetic direction. I think, did we talk about that with the pigeons? May not have. I
we're
know
not in
some
birds
birds
yet.
especially are really. I know we're not to birds yet. I wasn't sure if we brought it up on something, but um, there are some animals that have like an innate like magnetic sense of direction. Like some of it
Yeah.
has to do with
Well,
like
and
the
even
food.
simple like the monarch butterfly goes through crazy
Yeah,
migrations, and they're simple invertebrates.
yeah, and
Uh,
that's over generations too. Like
yeah.
multiple generations. The travel from Mexico up towards Canada and then back. It's crazy.
But this research is only possible due to decadal research. That's whenever you have a research project that maybe you don't do the whole portion of. It's over decades of time, and over multiple generations of scientists, we'll say. Um, so, and it's a photograph many years apart. So we start in 2007, where the first of these whales was documented in the Hervey Bay in Queensland, Australia, and then later on seen again in Queensland in 2013 before being found in Sao Paulo, Brazil in 2019. which a straight line distance is 14,200 kilometers, which would
That's
be
the minimum straight line distance, which is so to put it into reference points, that is going from in a straight line from Sydney, Australia to London, England.
yeah. That's not counting any backtracking or they have to go around the continent of South America to begin with.
Yeah.
So, there was a second whale that had an even longer journey. First photographed in 2003 at the Abrolhos Bank, the country's main humpback whale nursery. So that's Brazil's main nursery for humpback whale calves. And there was 9 adult whales with it at the time. 22 years later, in the fall of 2025, so that would be Brazil's spring, technically. It was found in Hervey Bay. So almost a flip-flop of what this previous whale had done.
Yeah.
Charting 15,100 kilometers. And if Alex said that the 14,000 something was what, 9,000 miles or something like that?
15,000. So 15,100 kilometers is just under 9,400 miles.
Exactly. Which is
crazy.
The record for the longest known movement of an individual humpback whale. So we're doing citizen science here using. So the fluke of a whale is the tail outline. So whenever a whale breaches and kind of like flips its tail up, a lot of people like to take pictures of it. And we're using citizen science using 19,283 fluke photographs collected between around 1985 and 2025, so about a 40-year period from Eastern Australia and Latin America, both from citizen scientists and professional researchers.
And especially for humpback whales, these flukes, which Tyler said is the tail fins, like the spread of the fins on the tails of the whale, they're unique to the point they're basically like their fingerprints.
Exactly. So I lost my train of thought. Thanks, Alex. They plug these into a recognition software, not quite an AI, just a data model that says, okay, this fluke matches. This is kind of like a fingerprint database. We'll say,
yeah,
it's a fluke database that says this whale matches this whale that we found in Brazil, and now matches in Australia.
Let me bring up a picture. So these are two separate humpbacks, but these like the colorations, the outline styles, different like
the fanning.
The way it's fanned out, the edge, like the border on the edges. That's how all the things they use to determine different whales, and especially, like I said, the humpbacks are especially known for this.
And the reason we think we're seeing these long migrations like this is due to climate change, the Antarctic sea ice, which then changes the distribution of the Antarctic krill, which would be the main food source for these humpback whales and many other baleen whales. This is the first evidence of a bidirectional exchange between distant humpback whale breeding populations between Australia and Brazil.
Yeah, and they've found that these two whales they're discussed in the article are the only two that they have found that traveled this distance. Most of the rest stay kind of more local. They'll travel a good distance, but not this far. And That's something that these long distance crossings may become more common, as Tyler said, as the Antarctic sea ice shifts as well as the krill moves over time, which will change the migration patterns, and these migrations may become more and more common. Won't just be a couple whales, it may be whole pods of whales.
Right. But that concludes our Nature in the News today. Very cool article I found. I know a lot of times we talk about really boring stuff on our Nature in the News, I feel like. Whether it's, things millions of years in the past or just tiny little things. But this one was relatively modern, relatively large scale. But we'll get into our lesson for today. We finished our amphibian talk last week when we talked about Sicilians. It was a longer episode, I know, guys. But we figured it would be better off for us to knock out every single Sicilian in one episode rather than split it into two separate episodes because they really don't have that many distinctions between the families. But we are going to start our discussion into reptiles today. So, Alex, reptiles are tetrapod vertebrates. Tetrapod means they have 4 limbs, and vertebrate means they have a skeletal structure similar to fish, similar to amphibians. Not much has really changed in terms of their skeletal structure. They are ectothermic, which fish are ectothermic. Like everything up to this point is still an ectotherm, right? Like fish and
For the
amphibians.
most part, yes.
Yeah. Which means that they are cold-blooded. They need an external force, per se, to maintain their internal body temperature. They are amniotic developers. That's the major difference between amphibians and reptiles is that you went from laying amniotic eggs. I like how there's frogs in this picture.
Yeah, it's supposed to be all reptiles. So they ignore the two pairs of frogs.
Exactly.
Or
The toads.
And the toads. Hold on, I'll find a better picture.
But so the difference between an amniot and an amniot is that amniots lay eggs that have extra membranes around their shell. So an amniot would be a mammal, a bird, and a reptile. Granted, mammals don't lay eggs, but the ones that do lay amniotic eggs. And are derived from a former relative that was an amniot like reptiles.
Yes, so I have a halfway decent picture or image to pull up. So this would be, if you think like a chicken egg, but this is kind of amniotic eggs as a whole. So you have like the shell, and that's something we'll talk about more as we dive further into the reptiles. But up until this point, there's this, you can kind of see this darker pink outline around the embryo is what is known as the amniotic, and the inside of that is amniotic fluid. So like Tyler said, it's another membrane outside, like not counting this kind of gel-like membrane that surrounds everything, that kind of directly surrounds the embryo. It helps kind of protect it more, easier transfer of nutrients, things like that. So it's another layer within the egg that is now that we're getting into reptiles and the higher animals, is something that you'll find now. The previous, like with the when we were talking about the frogs and things, when we were looking at their eggs, you saw just the little embryo like the tadpole, and then that kind of jelly, which would be kind of like the shell, quote unquote, almost, or more like that fluid in between the shell. So there's nothing between that outer jelly layer and the embryo itself.
So now we have a protective film over top of the embryo.
Yeah, an additional protective membrane is basically the easiest way to say it.
So, as Alex said, there's a little bit more to an amniotic egg than just the amnion, which is that bit that protects the egg. And Alex, if you could pull that picture back up, please. He closed the tab. I know. I'm sorry.
I did.
You have 2 other layers within. So within the chorion, or the chorion, I don't know how exactly I pronounce it. I think it's the chorion.
Mm-hmm.
That is where gas exchange takes place between the outside of the egg and the inside. So things like oxygen and nitrogen and CO2 will be exchanged on that layer. And inside that you have your yolk and your other nutrient and waste compartments. Then you have a third membrane known as the Allenwa. So that's where they hold all their waste. It's waste disposal and storage. So the yolk sac is for nutrients, and the Allenwa is for waste. And then surrounding that typically is a shell. So in amphibians, that shell is that jelly-like substance. Whereas once you get to reptiles, in reptiles it's a little bit different than in birds. Reptiles have a more leathery shell surrounding their eggs, whereas a bird has an eggshell that you're typical with when you get like your eggs from the grocery store.
Yes.
Which is more like calcium based. Granted, they're both calcium based, but
believe so.
I think it's just a difference in structure, to be honest.
It's like a fiber. It's actually more collagen, keratin. It's actually more keratin based.
Oh, okay. The more you know.
Not calcium, but yeah. So I mean, I think there is some calcium within things like keratin, as well as collagen and elastin, which are multiple structural proteins. You think collagen and elastin are typically like you think your skin, kind of what gives it that like
Elasticity and
yeah,
like,
the elasticity, kind of the springy feeling to it. Keratin is more like your hair, your nails. There is some in your skin as well. It's a harder protein, so that's why but it's still fibrous and somewhat flexible. That's why your nails can still bend a little bit. They're not just completely rigid and solid.
all right. Thank you, Alex. That'll bring us to the four orders of reptiles. So we have the squamates, the testudines, crocodilia, and rhinocephalia. So that is going to be your testudines are your turtles. They have that hard shell that you're typical width of a turtle, and everything is protected within that shell. Crocodilians are crocodiles and all their kin. So that's the gharial, caiman, alligator, crocodile. All of those guys are within one order. You have squamata, so those are lizards and snakes together. That's venomous snakes, non-venomous snakes, lizards, legless lizards, everything in that group. And then the last group is rhinocephalia. That is the tuatara. That is the only living member of that group. It's actually not in the... no, it is. It's in the top right corner.
Is that...
It's close enough.
Is that a tuatara?
It's close enough.
Yeah, they are very...
They're very lizard-like. They just have a different taxonomic...
that top right one might be a tuatara.
The earliest known reptiles date all the way back to the Carboniferous period. So they stem from temnospondyls of amphibians, and they developed that amniotic egg, and that was their main foothold into surviving the Carboniferous extinction that we'll get to a little bit later on in our notes. Alex, you want to take over for a little bit?
Yeah, so as I said, the early reptiles started in the Carboniferous, and then from there they kind of separated a little more into the archosaurs and the lepidosaurs. This happened during kind of the Permian era, and this is where we get the two separate, kind of why the reptiles have separated out into more groups. I forget kind of where the archosaurs and lepidosaurs, how they move down into the modern reptiles.
So archosaurs would be crocodilians and birds, and mammals would be archosaurs.
Okay, and lepidosaurs are the remaining.
Yes.
Okay. But modern reptiles inhabit all the continents except for Antarctica. Kind of going back to that ectothermy, they need warm temperatures for their body processes to occur. They range in size from the Jaraguá dwarf gecko, which is only 17 millimeters in size, so teeny tiny,
less than an inch,
little guys, all the way up to the saltwater crocodile, which will grow over 6 meters in length. So that is, a meter is a little bit longer than a yard, so 6 yards, that's quick math, almost 20 feet.
A little bit more, because if it's a meter's a little bit more than a yard, so it's closer to 20 feet. Large ones can go to 24.
Yeah. So massive range of reptiles, and then although snakes and legless lizards do not have legs, thus legless lizards, they are still identified as tetrapods because this loss of limbs is actually a derived trait. So historically they would have had limbs and then they were lost over time, similar to why, as we talked in the earlier, whales, why they don't have hind legs.
Yeah, but they're still tetrapods because they have a fused hind leg. like a hind leg
Yeah,
and becomes their tail.
yeah, and a lot of their skeletons you'll actually find like a very little vestigial hind leg, kind of like it doesn't even show up. Like
Yeah.
you'd have to do an X-ray to see it, kind of thing. Um, Most reptiles are oviparous, so they lay eggs. They have they have the shells, typically a very leathery shell. Um, there are some species that are viviparous. They give birth to live young. I know snakes are really common with this. I
Some
believe,
snakes
if I
and
remember,
lizards, mostly in Squamata.
yeah. So if I remember correctly, I know like
Don't garter snakes give birth to live young?
I'm not sure about garter snakes. I know timber rattlesnakes do.
Yeah, because I know garter snakes have that big like breeding pit where they like all get together and it's like
A party.
it's a party and it just generates so much heat.
Yes. So this adaptation of having shells around the eggs is big because they are now able to retain their own moisture within the eggs, so they can be laid on land. They don't have to be laid in the water. So that is a major adaptation because now you are removing, you're kind of increasing the safety of the eggs because they are now.
We'll talk about it more when we get to the individual orders, but there's some really cool stuff with reptile eggs and temperature and gender. Stuff like that.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. But originally, Linnaeus, our man, described amphibians and reptiles in the same class because amphibia.
They were in class amphibia.
Sorry, I stopped reading and I messed myself up. They were both described in amphibia because there were a couple prevalent snakes in Sweden, where he was from, that were often found hunting in the water, and that's where this kind of classical way of identifying organisms has gone by the wayside, because things like that, like, oh, we found them in the water, so they must be amphibians, which is obviously not true. There's more to it than just that. But it wasn't until about the 19th century that reptiles were described as their own independent class. So that's the 1800s, pretty recent as far as history goes. I think Linnaeus was the 1700s, so
yeah, it wasn't that long, but it was still a century away.
Long enough.
So Linnaeus described everybody as amphibia. All reptiles are amphibia, even though snakes we know now are reptiles. And the original name for reptiles was batrachia, I believe.
That sounds right. But reptiles were very, very prevalent until about the Carboniferous rainforest collapse. Reptiles were often overshadowed by the much larger tetrapod amphibians of that time, but then after that, starting to get into kind of, I think, is the Permian after the Carboniferous?
Yeah, you get to the Permian, and then we'll talk about
Cretaceous,
the Mesozoic period, and then you have dinosaurs.
The Mesozoic, Cretaceous is a period within the Mesozoic era. I'm struggling today. I'm having a moment. But the stem reptiles were able to survive these drier climates partially because of the adaptations of their eggs, as well as their adaptations to themselves, because reptiles tend to have very thick, leathery, scaly skin. They
develop scales to help with moisture control rather than a waxy cuticle.
Yes. And so they took over a lot of the niches that were held by these amphibians before the collapse of the rainforest. And then during this time, reptiles began to adapt into either just herbivores or carnivores, eating a lot of insects and fish of the time.
So now we're into the Permian period, where reptiles evolved into megafauna known as pelycosaurs, and were soon replaced by therapsids. So Alex is currently working on pulling up images of those two pelycosaurs. One of the more famous pelycosaurs is the Dimetrodon, and the sails were used for heat control, if I remember correctly, when I read books as a little kid on dinosaurs. And therapsids would become what we now know as mammals. They were, a predecessor to mammals, not quite. Conodont is like the true predecessor to mammals, I believe, but these are still give way to synapsids and eventually mammals. Other stem reptiles were also present during this time, such as parasaurs, which are large, herbivorous, very thick
They
individuals.
are wide.
And Mesosaurus, which is a genus of stem reptiles, they return to the water, developing webbed feet in the process and feeding on crustacea. Then comes the Mesozoic, which we so wonderfully call the age of reptiles. At this point, amphibians have taken the back seat. The humidity and moisture within the air is no longer. We're developing more of a modern climate per se. It's still a lot warmer than modern day, but this is the period that goes way to archosauromorphs, which had elongated hind legs and an erect pose. Early members resembling crocodiles. Archosaurs with the dominant group, diversifying further into dinosaurs and pterosaurs. So Alex pulled up an image of an archosauromorph. You can see outside of the snout region, it is a very crocodile-looking creature. Theropods were the other group during this time, so most dinosaurs are branched into theropods and sauropods. Sauropods are the long neck, more herbivorous, where theropods are more like Tyrannosaurus, Spinosaurus, things like that. They could walk on just their hind limbs. As well as lepidosaurs were another group to come out this time, mostly taking the form of mosasaurs, a large group of marine reptiles. Mosasaurs are huge, controlled the seas during this time, really, alongside plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs, which we don't quite have a solid definition of where they fall in the taxonomic tree at this moment. That's weird. That was fun. I can stop. I'll stop. All right, back to what we were talking about.
Little technical difficulties.
So
Apologize.
now we've talked about the Mesozoic period. So now we're talking about post-Cretaceous extinctions. This is after the death of all the dinosaurs. The only things that really left were the turtles and the crocodilians in terms of large numbers. A lot of reptiles, smaller reptiles, snakes and lizards survived, turning into squamates. And of the dinosaurs, only the beaked birds remained. And Alex will tell you that birds are reptiles, and I won't tell you that they're their own thing. And it's a highly debated conversation between the two of us. But to each their own. If you believe the birds are their own thing, they're their own thing. If not, they're reptiles. That's all you need to know. So now, after the Cretaceous extinction, a lot of the niches that were filled by these large dinosaurs now need filled again. So we look towards birds and mammals to fill those niches. Reptiles kind of take the back burner themselves, as the amphibians did during the Mesozoic, and now they fill smaller roles because they're much smaller individuals. Now we'll get into a little bit of anatomical uniqueness to reptiles. Alex, if you want to start us off here.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, right there. All right, so, so kind of something that is unique up to that really hasn't been something that you saw up to this point is lepidosaurs and turtles now possess 3-chambered hearts. So up to this point, pretty much everything has only had 2-chambered hearts. So they have like the top and bottom. The top would receive oxygen from the body, or receive blood from the body, and the bottom pushes it back out. Now, at this point, having a 3rd chamber allows for those two chambers to serve different functions. So like one, it receives it from the body and then it gets pushed to the lungs, and received from the lungs, pushed out to the body. Now, it said 3 chambers. Typically, there's just the one. It's 2 atria, which are the top chambers, and then there's 1 ventricle, which is the bottom chamber. That's the one that pushes out. Now, this is, like I said, that variation of blood flow. You're not just mixing the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood all the time. And also may help a little bit with thermoregulation. But then you get into the crocodilians, and then from there on to the higher organisms, you now have a 4-chambered heart. So you have 2 atria and 2 ventricles. And this is very unique because now you have one side receives the blood from the body, pushes it to the lungs, and the other side receives the oxygenated blood from the lungs and then pushes it out to the body. So much more efficient. You don't have that mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, so the oxygen is carried to the body much more efficiently, carries more oxygen. And this is why a lot of, especially like the crocodilians and those other things, why these animals are able to be so much larger, because you have more efficient oxygen delivery to the body. And in the crocodilians as well, they're actually able to bypass pulmonary circulation.
Yeah, we had this conversation last night, and I was really confused about it.
Yeah.
But Alex explained it to me in a text message, and
yeah, the way I kind of explained it is
you bypass the pressure on the lungs, you said.
Yeah, so the way I kind of figured, kind of what I figured in
his idea was that they would bypass their lungs to not put so much pressure on them, so they could dive deeper and hold their breath for longer.
Yes, yeah, that's kind of the way, and especially I think crocodiles, they kind of stay in a yeah. So then so actually in the AI overview, when I kind of did a quick Google search, that being able to stay underwater longer periods of times because the lungs are deflated because of the pressure from the water. So then this allows this oxygenated blood to kind of stay within the actual body and the muscles longer, so you don't lose the oxygen. Because when you breathe, there's still some oxygen in the blood, and that escapes as well with the carbon dioxide that you breathe out, and then oxygen is taken in. You take some carbon dioxide in because it's just in the air naturally. But by deflating the lungs, they conserve energy and oxygen by not having to have that blood pumped into the lungs. It just pumps straight back out to the body, so they can stay underwater for longer periods of time. And then another kind of idea that I hadn't thought about is they actually able to divert some of that carbon dioxide rich blood towards the stomach, using that CO2 to make the gastric acid more rapidly, so they can break down larger meals. Now, that's one I hadn't thought about that either.
One thing I forgot to put in the notes, unrelated to crocodiles, it's about turtles. Turtles, we talked about how they have that 3-chambered heart, but their body works a little bit different than other reptiles because of that rigid shell. They can't expand. Like, think of yourself, viewer, as you breathe, your chest puffs in and out, your diaphragm acts. So turtles can't do that per se because of this rigid shell. So they have to develop different ways of contracting their lungs.
Yes. Or they bypass their lungs altogether and they breathe through their butt.
That is true. Some members do that.
That is pure.
Turtles are very much anatomically different per species.
Yes, they are kind of their own ball of wax.
Yeah, which we'll talk about when we get to them. But as Alex said, all modern non-avian reptiles exhibit some form of cold-bloodedness, relying on external heat to maintain the internal temperature.
Bless you. So that's why you'll see a lot of reptiles, like they sit in the sun. That's why they're not in Antarctica, because they need that heat to maintain their internal temperature so their metabolisms can work. That's why you'll see reptiles out in like sunny areas sitting on rocks warming themselves up in the morning. As well, defense mechanisms among reptiles, a lot of them just use avoidance. They just avoid predators the best they can. But in lizards and snakes, they use a lot of camouflage, especially some lizards. You think like the chameleon, they can actually shift the colorations of their skins a little bit. Now, it's not camouflage the way cuttlefish and octopi were, especially the cuttlefish. That is its own unique
that's its
sort
own
of thing.
Type of mimicry, type of color changing.
And then on the other side, there are like venomous snakes and lizards kind of go the way when we talked about the poison dart frog, where they're very bright in coloration, showing that they are dangerous. And then
most of those come in the form of like sea snakes, coral snake, things like that.
Yes.
And that's come to the point where many coral snakes are found in North America prevalently. So there's a lot of North American snakes that use Ptesian mimicry, which is
they look
looking
like that
similar
venomous
to
snake.
a poisonous snake. So
Yes.
the king snake?
Is it the king snake or is it the? Yeah, I think it is the king snake. I know the coral snake, or the milk snake is what it is.
That's what it is. It's milk snake. I knew it was like something like it wasn't a rat snake because rat snakes are black.
Yeah,
But
so they look very similar. So a coral snake is they have red, yellow, and black striping. A coral snake, if there's an old ditty that says
the red and yellow deadly fellow.
If red touches yellow, it'll kill a fellow. If red touches black, it's a friendly jack.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, so if the red and yellow stripes touch, that is a coral snake. It is venomous. If it bites you, it can kill you. If the yellow stripes touch the black stripes, that is a milk snake, and they are non-venomous. Now, they may still bite you, and it might hurt, but it's not going to kill you because they're non-venomous. But to the untrained eye and like to birds and things that would like to eat the snakes, it looks similar enough that they just don't mess with it.
Right. That concludes our lesson for the day. We didn't really want to dive too far deep into the anatomic differences. A lot of it comes with like how their lungs work because they are the first fully terrestrial clade. That they have their own way their lungs work, as well as how their ears and other systems within their body work. So we'll move on into our recurring segments. I'll kick us off with our amazing species. Today's amazing species is the Orinoco crocodile. These guys are found in the northern parts of the Amazon River system around Venezuela and Colombia. They are relatively large, I would say, in terms of crocodilomorphs. They are critically endangered, assessed in 2017 and published in 2018. The population has reduced by 80% over the past 3 generations, which is 75 years. A lot of reptiles, especially the larger ones, tend to live longer. So about 25 years for crocodiles, for this specific species, which leaves it as critically endangered. It is an understood threat, but it's currently not ongoing due to international legislation blocking any trade of the species. But they are oftentimes persecuted because they are large crocodiles. They are seen as a deadly threat, as well as loss of habitat due to deforestation and things like that, as a limited number of mature individuals in the protected areas. So I don't have a population. Number of mature individuals. Best estimate, it's about 190 mature individuals right now. Alex, if you could please pull up the map.
Yep.
And we can kind of go over what the map means, because there's more colors on this one than there typically are. So, in the yellow regions, that's where it has been known to be found, and is still currently found. All the lighter red regions, more purplish in color, are possible extant regions where it could possibly live, but there hasn't been a sighting in a long time, and there's nothing that says that they still live there. And the red areas are areas where it is confirmed to be extinct does no longer occur in those areas. It is known to inhabit a wide variety of aquatic land areas, mostly in seasonal rivers, uh, and have been found in 34 different areas, 16 in Venezuela, 16 in Colombia, and 2 covering both countries on the border regions. But mostly in those seasonal rivers, kind of like once you get towards the equator, you have 2 seasons really. You don't have that 4 season like we do. Where we're at, you have a wet and a dry season. So the rainforests will flood and create more temporary rivers that the Orinocos tend to live in. They are one of the largest crocodilians in the world, the largest individual reaching 669 centimeters, so almost 7 meters long. But this was way back in 1983, and once again prior to that in 1860. Their threats include farming, mostly livestock farming, as well as fishing and harvesting of aquatic resources. And there are low levels of illegal harvest. They are a local food animal, which I'm sure the national governments don't really mind that one, because I'm sure that local food is more for like indigenous tribes.
Yeah. The bushmeat is typically what it's referred to as.
But they are local in non-traditional medicine, so more of that herbal remedy type medicine.
Mm-hmm.
We do have an action recovery plan, and they do occur in conservation sites. The whole range is basically a conservation site. That's all I have, Alex. I'll kick it back over to you for your most wanted.
Sounds good. So our most wanted for this week is one that Tyler and I have heard a lot about, something that is found quite often in the American South, especially. It is the Burmese python. I don't think I've talked about them before. I couldn't find it in our previous notes. But they are one of the largest species of snake in the world. They are native to a large area in Southeast Asia, and in its home range, it is considered vulnerable.
I love when that happens.
Yeah, it was recently considered a subspecies of the Indian python, but it is now its own species as of 2009. It is primarily invasive in the state of Florida in the southern southeastern United States, primarily because of the pet trade. People would buy them as small snakes, realize that they get massive. They typically grow up to 5 meters or about 16 feet long, but there are some specimens that have been unconfirmed length up to over 7 meters, about 23 feet long. So they get very, very large. Typically, the females are only a little bit larger, but tend to be heavier and bulkier than the males. These, as you can kind of see, they're kind of a dark color. They're non-venomous. They are, as I said, they are pythons, so they are constrictors, which we'll talk about more when we get to the snakes. And as I said, they're kind of pretty bulky. Some of your average females can weigh anywhere from 64 pounds to almost 80 pounds, even I think all the way up to about 165 pounds, depending again on the size. The males, I think, tend to be a little lighter, more in that kind of like 20 to 50 pound range, depending on the size of the snake. The record in Florida was caught at a 19 feet long, in one of their national preserves. There's the heaviest snake ever recorded was a Burmese python. Now this was a captive snake, named Baby, which at her death she was 403 pounds or 183 kilograms. And she was measured at a length of 5.74 meters or 18 feet 10 inches. Now it does take them a little while to get to the adult stage. They need to be about 2.25 meters in length, about just under 8 feet long, to be kind of at their adult size. But they grow very rapidly and they get to that point pretty quickly. First introduced into the Florida Everglades between the mid 1990s to early 2000s because of the pet trade, and they released these. And then as of 2024, there's anywhere between 30 to 300,000 Burmese python in the Florida Everglades, which is kind of the swamp region of Florida. There are also some hybrids that they have found between the Burmese and Indian python, kind of why they were considered subspecies up until fairly recently. And they have very voracious diets in areas that they inhabit and are well established. A lot of ground-dwelling mammals like foxes and rabbits have pretty much disappeared. Things like raccoons, possum, and even white-tailed deer in the American South, especially the Everglades, they tend to be much smaller. Their populations in those areas have dropped into well over the 90%, raccoons almost completely gone, and as well as other predators like bobcats, and even there are some very large pythons that have been known to eat American alligators and crocodiles. So they are insane predators. They can eat very large things. They eat a lot of birds. They've found 25 kind of protected species in the digestive tract of 85 pythons that were collected. And even some that not just protected but even endangered. And they're typically nocturnal hunters, and fortunately they don't breed super often, typically in the March and April, so like the early spring, laying anywhere from a dozen to a few dozen eggs, about 12 to 36-ish eggs in each clutch. And the females will lay with the eggs until they hatch, wrapping around them and kind of twitching their muscles to make the eggs warmer. And another thing is that has been found, at least in captivity, that Burmese pythons are able to reproduce asexually, which is just another kind of notch in their belt of why they are such massive problems as invasive species, and they are a huge pest. So in their native range, it said they are vulnerable. The wild population is estimated to have declined by at least 30% due to habitat loss and overharvesting. But in its invasive ranges, it is basically a remove on site, whether that is captured and turned into authorities, or if the folks finding them kill them on site. I know at least in Florida it is actually a big thing. You can capture, and the government will give money for captured Burmese pythons.
Anything else to add, Alex?
That is pretty much it as far as I have. They do carry some diseases, but that's a lot of invasive organisms. The primary one that they carry is called Reptilia orientalis, which is a sort of parasitic disease.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, good times.
That'll kick us over to our From the Vault for today. Today we're talking about Hylonomus. It is the basics. Basically, it's the stem species for all reptiles, we believe. Living 318 million years ago, during that Carboniferous period. It was originally a microsaur, and is a crown group of amniote. Although many modern day cladistic analysis suggest that it is the earliest known reptile, a 2025 analysis placed it outside of amniotes, which would make it less related to modern reptiles. It was described by John William Dawson in 1816 and was given the name Hylonomus lyelli, thanks to Dawson's teacher Charles Lyell. And it was previously known under two names, H. accidentatus and H. wyemani, before being named as H. lyelli. They were around 8 to 10 inches long, so 20 to 25 centimeters, and would look rather similar to modern-day lizards, had small, sharp teeth, and likely ate small invertebrates like millipedes and early insects. They had a multitude of pointy scales covering their body, and are described as having slender and lightweight leg and arm bones, long hands and feet, and a narrow and tongue-shaped part in the roof of the mouth, a bumpy structure on the backbones, and a hole in a place in the skull, which would be kind of like a napsid type thing, which would make it a synapsid. That's really all I have for these guys, so I will toss it over to Alex. We're going to be talking about endothermy versus mesothermy and ectothermy.
Yes. So, for our ecology encyclopedia today, something that we've kind of talked about before, but we haven't gone into it a whole lot. So, talking about ectotherms versus endotherms, and then you can kind of throw, they're sort of called like mesotherms in there, which I'll explain that. So kind of it's always colloquially being known as like being cold-blooded or warm-blooded. So kind of, you can see in the image I pulled up, like pretty much everything we've talked about up till now, insects, fish, amphibians, reptiles, they need temperature from the environment to help them go through their metabolic processes. So that's why things like snakes and frogs, early on cool mornings, if you see them out, you'll see them like out in the sun, warming themselves up. Why some fish will move towards the surface of the water earlier in the day to warm themselves up. And as they warm up, that's their metabolism kicks in. They're able to kind of move better. They can digest better. But they can't really regulate that themselves. They are dependent on their environment, and especially the sun. And that's why in areas like where we live, in the wintertime, a lot of these organisms will kind of hibernate over the winter because it's too cold for them to kind of maintain their regular lifestyle. While quote-unquote warm-blooded animals, or endotherms, are actually able to use their metabolism to create heat within themselves. So like people, like we are endotherms. That's why we have a relatively stable body temperature. Like 98.6 is the average body temperature. Other mammals, but birds as well. But kind of that mesotherm that I talked about, they're kind of in the middle. So large ectotherms, so things like large sharks, leatherback sea turtle, which is kind of what was talked about on here. And this even also kind of applies to, if you look back at like the dinosaurs, they would have been considered kind of that mesotherm, where they're dependent on the temperature of the environment around them, but they are large enough and they have enough muscles that as they move, they generate heat as they move, and so they're kind of able to generate their own heat from in their bodies just because they are so large. But this is, like I said, this is why at this point mammals are one of the most prevalent, at least the large organisms that are prevalent is because they're able to maintain their own body temperature, and why they have spread to all corners of the world, not just kind of the tropical warm regions. And why things like whales, elephants, why they're able to survive is because they're not dependent on their environment. Why whales can travel 15,000 kilometers in the Southern Ocean, kind of around Antarctica, where the water is much colder, is because they are able to generate their own heat and maintain that body temperature to survive. Tyler, do you have anything to add on this? Kind of a shorter one today.
Yeah, I don't really. It's really just can you generate your own body heat? Can you not? Or are you somewhere in the middle where you're so large that you kind of do, but you don't?
Mm-hmm.
So that's been Life the Complete Story. This is our first episode on reptiles. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, really, to stay up to date when we post new episodes. Make sure to subscribe to the page at Riverside. I'll find it. Give me a second. lifethecompletestory.riverside.com. Send us an email at lifecompletestory@gmail.com. And that's all.
Yeah. So thank you again for joining us on another episode of Life the Complete Story. I've been Alex, and that's been Tyler. As we say at the end of every episode, keep on learning, learn something new. You'll never know what you find interesting. We thank you for joining us today, and we will see you again next time.